in some questions in the past week or two, and that is that we are preparing for the next cycle in the MSAP grant world. And the requirements around how we identify and select schools that would be eligible to include in that grant application is what we've just outlined to you. But the Wake County Public School System does have a history of identifying locally funded magnets that are not part of a magnet grant process that we identify, and we've got examples that we've just done, like Stow with an immersion program, or Jeffries Grove with an emerging program, and Hodge. Those are locally funded district magnets where we've provided an opportunity for a magnet theme and programming that is outside of what we would have done and did with the magnet grant process. So,
we'll continue to consider those
correct,
opportunities as
obviously,
needed.
yes. Because I think when we start looking at all of the schools that meet the guidelines for the grant, I am sure that as large as we are, all of you are invested in the schools in your area, and other schools will pop up that we may want to think about, and I think that's important to do. But just know that there are two different mechanisms for how we magnetize schools. And given the discussion around some of the questions we had as well, is a magnet program the answer, or could it be something else? So.
But there may be some cases where we need to do something special to maximize the use of school facilities or something else, but it might not be every one of the magnet grant principles.
Questions?
Thoughts, questions? We're up to 40 magnet schools. And that includes the early colleges, that 40?
40 magnets and 5 early colleges.
Does the 40 include all application schools? Or does the early colleges include the Wake County ones and which category are they in?
So the 5 early colleges would be both of the leadership academies, the partnership with NC State, the STEM Early College, the Wake Early College of Health Sciences, Wake Tech, Wake Med, and then Vernon Malone College and Career. And those are all application schools. The rest, and there are 5, and then there are 40 additional identified magnet schools that have both a base population and magnet population.
So those 5 are only standalone magnets.
They're
not magnets.
They're standalone application.
Every student there is there by application.
They're application schools.
It's kind of more the innovation side of the house than
Yeah.
curriculum enhancement side of the house than the magnet side of the house. But we include them because they're a choice.
Can you talk a bit about some of the themes that was on slide 24, where the themes are listed, where you've seen popularity or growth? I know some, have been, we're expanding, for example, to Moore Square, the GTH basics. Middle school, I've heard that well received from parents, because that doesn't seem to be a high demand theme. But can you give us some summary on where we are with themes and response to themes?
So I don't know if you're referencing the ones that were just in the grant, so like a Moore Square and a Poe were in the grant cycle that we're doing right now that are doing, particularly Moore Square has really taken off with the GT-AIG programming.
And that was an area where the applications were certainly outweighing the seats available. So we knew there was demand for additional programming for that particular program. But as we move forward, in terms of looking at existing magnet programs and whatever might be new, I think that's actually the work that they're engaged in now to just explore. But it's also important that the match of a program to a school also include something around the community and the people and the staff in the school. So I think where we find that it works best is to not identify a theme and then put it in a school, but to identify the schools and then work on the theme with the principal and the staff and the community. So. Okay.
So if we concentrate on the top table, this is keeping current attendance lines as they are, So the bottom row of this top table is Oakview, and there's no children in there because it doesn't have an attendance area. So as you look from left to right, you can see the growth that is projected for each of these schools based on our land use data. And for example, Holly Springs Elementary School at the top goes from a base percentage, well, I should say 62% of the children in there are base, which is 892. By 2020, we're expecting so much growth in that area that it would be at 142% of base utilization, just counting the kids that are base in the attendance area, not counting the out-of-base kids. So a lot of growth potential there. The second
Even
table.
though that's a confined area, that base doesn't have potential for new neighborhoods in it. I wouldn't think, so that's,
Look
With
at
this-
this, back up to
Yeah.
28.
The catchment.
I know. It's a very confined, well,
This is one of the areas I think that we just got back some permit
Current
information
base is
today
kind of-
about Holly Springs, and their number of permits this year is growing faster than it ever has before. I mean, there is just a lot of potential happening in Holly Springs all through the municipality.
that base is
So,
bigger than
so back to the middle table. This is the first scenario where it impacts 5 existing schools.
I thought. Surrounded at this point.
And I'll call your attention to Oakview, projected to 2020. And according to our estimates of base population that would go to that school, not counting outside of the base, it's only utilized at 64% in 5 years. So here's a case where Oakview is situated kind of out on the outskirts, and it really can't creep up far enough without it interfering with other schools to grab enough kids. And at the same time, looking at all the other 5 schools that are in the mix. So perhaps a large impact area, in the case of Oakview, is not the most efficient way to fill that school. And the final table is scenario 2. You'll notice that the 3 schools are grayed out, they're not impacted. So if you look at Holly Springs and Holly Grove and then Oakview, you see that we're up to 84% utilization, base utilization for Oakview, which is where we would like to be, closer to where we would like to be. So this underlines the fact that the determination of the impact area is, in my view, the most critical part of this process. A couple more comments on this that I think are important to the discussion. Viridia is in our forecasting database, and I'm in constant contact with the Apex planners about what's going on there, and they're expecting homes at a rapid development. I believe the model at this point is putting more than 600 kids in Viridia over the 10-year forecast, and that may be conservative. So Viridia is not part of this impact area because it's currently within Apex Elementary, Apex Middle School. So that's a consideration that we should look at.
So looking at these maps, you can pick any one of the ones we were just looking at. Viridia would be that white
Yes,
area
ma'am. Yes.
Yeah.
in between the two
That's right.
rows.
That's
They're
right.
like this, but south of U, or
Between
east of
55
US 1.
That's right.
540.
That's exactly right. Right there.
Thank you.
Right, it's right
That's
there.
Viridia.
So Viridia is such a large development, I think it needs special consideration on this, whether it's included in impact area or whether it's handled separately is something to consider.
And are y'all looking to do that in this or the next year? And that's coming in this next year's plan or the next year's?
Well, Oakview is 16, 17 schools.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So that's a consideration. The other consideration is E45. We don't have a site for that yet. We don't know where it's going to be, but the optimal area for impact for E45 would be, could be somewhere in this area. So,
Wow.
Now we have our, and before we get to our timeline, any questions on this part or back to our achievement pillar? Now that we've heard it all, yes, Mr. Sutton?
Yeah, on the achievement pillar, my thinking, and I'm thinking about how we sort of look at, overcrowding or undercrowding, and we, even though this is pretty much based on growth, where we kind of look at those issues, we, look at schools like Southeast and Inlow and those that sort of come in. So I'm thinking about the elementary support model, and I think if you look at most of those 12 schools, there's probably a similar theme in all of those of concentrations of, I think, what was
Performing
performing
achieving.
and the low achieving. Should we be, at this point, when we think about the assignment plan and look at some of those schools that are in the elementary support model and think about how using assignment as a tool to help support those schools and what we're trying to accomplish there as well? Does that make sense? No?
No, I understand what you're asking. Just trying to figure out what it looks like.
How and where? How and where?
Which way
Is that
we're
what?
going with it.
How and where?
I don't,
That's
Pushing out,
that's
pushing
question
in,
number-
I don't know.
Right. So most of the schools some of the schools in the elementary support model are under enrolled. If you look at a Lincoln Heights, for example, but some of them are crowded, like a Walnut Creek. So if you're going to look at using assignment to support changes in the population that's at the school, you're either bringing students in or you're taking students out. Yes? Okay. So in general, I think part of what we're going to struggle is where they would go and what impact it has on schools that would be nearby that students that were coming out would go, and where the students that you want to bring in would come from. And that's,
Some of those schools are fairly distant from the others. And Fox Road is out there, Lincoln Heights is out there.
right. Fox is a school that's recently been magnetized.
Right.
So there's some work that needs to happen there around the magnet program growing.
Then you get to go to Nightdale, so.
And the last enrollment plan did impact Fox Road, but to Mr. Sutton's point, I think it should be part of this discussion.
I mean, if it can.
Yeah,
I'm just,
where we can.
again, I'm also sort of thinking about it again too, is, I guess, the bottom line question is assignment